You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Integration Station. I'm naturally Ashley, your host, and here with us today we have Hugh, who is the Mushroom Shaman. He's going to talk to us today about what shamanism is, some techniques you guys can use in your own life, and all kinds of stuff related to mushrooms, the sacred cultivation and gardening of mushrooms, and also cactus. So without further ado, I'm just going to bring Hugh on and introduce him to you. Hi, Hugh. Welcome.
Hello. Nice to actually see your face. I mean, I see your face on social media, but we're kind of face to face.
Yeah, this is the closest we've been, though I know your cousin's living in my area. I've got to meet her face to face, and I'm hoping sometime over the summer I get to do the same with you as well. You know, there's something special about that, like taking it from the virtual world and, you know, getting to know each other that way, and then, you know, actually getting to feel the presence of somebody. It's totally different. And and like a reward for all that basis work to begin with. You know, it's such a blessing that we have technology to connect with each other, but it's not the same as connecting in person, though it is a nice vessel to do so. Yeah.
Well, you're in California now. You made a big move.
Yeah, a couple of them. Where exactly are you located right now?
I live and make my home in Arizona, but I grew up like with my cousin and everyone in California, Southern California actually. But you guys are up in NorCal now. What town are you in?
In Humboldt, I'm in one that's called Neeland, so it's in between Eureka and Arcata, but up on the hill.
Okay. Yeah, my cousin's in Eureka, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep running into her in Arcata, though, so they're still close enough. It's funny.
Yeah, a small community.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be on the 101.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey, you know, becoming a shaman or even finding that path. What's it been like? When did it all happen?
Okay, yeah, let's do the whole David Copperfield thing. So I grew up in Southern California. Actually lived across the street from my cousin who's up there working with the green in the as they call it, the green triangle, the emerald triangle up there in Humboldt. And we both grew up in a town called Carlsbad, which is North San Diego. And gosh, you know, her and I are genetically a little different. I'm raised of the same family name, the Hughes family name. My given name was Trevar hyphenated Acuña-Hughes. So that's my mother's Spanish last name. So I am part indigenous Mexican and various other Spanish backgrounds. And my cousin is full Hughes, more Caucasian. So I have like both cultures. And because it's Southern California, it's really easy to kind of get embedded in a lot of the Mexican culture there, which has elements, at least in my family, of the Native American sort of like approved spirituality and animism and some of the cowboy stuff that you get from a lot of Southwestern vibes. And I was lucky enough to be allowed to study things like shamanism and animism and natural sciences and spirituality and even tarot and Western magic from a young age. And while I do have a Catholic grandmother, my grandfather was Protestant, and my mother wasn't brought up in a Catholic way. So even though a lot of the family members were Catholic, there was still sort of like this approved spiritual, open, natural Native American way about what I was allowed to study as a kid. And so I got early on exposed to attending Native American powwow ceremonies, dancing, and doing studies of the occult, studies of basically the altered states and consciousness. I was sort of triggered by a couple incidents. I had like a very, I would call these chironic events, or a wounding that leads to a full spiritual awakening and then a healing. As an early child, I had a head injury, and I was stitched up for a big cut in my head that happened at one of my grandparents' houses in Carlsbad. And then that may have led to some combination of just learning disorders, CPTSD, and then I was never really diagnosed with those things, except for I was told I have ADD by a lot of Western medicine people, pediatricians, and they put me on medication for it. So me and the endless energy that is given to you when you take, at a very young age 6, a stimulant for the mind, I decided to do broad span research on how to correct the problem. And kind of came full circle with spiritualism and understanding consciousness, and then the Native American arts, resolving some of the trauma in my teenage years, and working with later Sweat Lodge, and eventually in theogens or psychedelics as I became, above 18. I waited to do my first drug, real altered experience until I was about 21, and it was 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, not anything else. So I had Ritalin as a kid growing up. I was pretty much sober until I did 5-MeO-DMT for the first time.
And then you went right in.
Then it's like, whoa, there's one path. Yeah. It was a solid path for sure.
Yeah.
And
it's a solid medicine.
Yeah. And it really woke me up. But at the same time, when I say that, it's like I had the spiritual background, and I had, the support of people who were like, oh yeah, investigate yoga. So I had been a yoga instructor by the age of 21. And they were like, study some meditation. So I had studied a little bit of, because over there in Southern California, we have the blessing of Swamis, which is Paramahansa Yogananda, or the Self-Realization Fellowships remnants there. And so I was studying some of the works of Yogananda and the Vedantic knowledge of India. And so getting thrown into a really blasted open doors of perception experience was okay. I handled it pretty well. And then, I went kind of deeper into the who am I? How can I be of service? What's the right path? Because it felt like it was a little bit of what the Native Americans had showed me with Sweat Lodge and some of the sober dance ceremonies. Our sweats and our channeling and our medicine wheels, we're always sober. And then my yoga studio was also very very dogmatic. They had me shave my head for a while to train there and just kind of be more monk-like aesthetic, stuff like that. So for someone between the age of 18 and 21, those extremities started putting a lot of pressure on me. And I found it was better to sort of take apprenticeship. And somewhere right after age 21, I started looking for other people in the area that were animists, that saw the soul of the world. And maybe a little bit on the pagan side, a little bit on the tantric side, drawing from things that I already knew, and teaching me more about psychedelics, more about spirit and the consciousness of the earth as it expresses itself through sacred plants and mushrooms. And I found some really cool people, and I was very lucky to have an apprenticeship going with a farmer who was a master herbalist, who was able to tell me all about the local plant species and tell me a little bit about all of his psychedelic experiences in the 70s. And I got a lot of wonderful hands-on experience working on that farm. And so my second psychedelic experience, entheogenic natural plant substance experience, believe it or not, because I am such a heavy rep for my brand Mushroom Shaman, was actually Sacred Cactus, San Pedro, because it grows so easily and so naturally in Southern California. I was helping on the farm, and he would give me cuttings of it, kind of told me how to prepare it, and it took forever to get it right. Vomiting, nausea, days of cooking, and just did it sort of like grassroots from what I understood with very little internet research. At the time, I didn't have a computer. I would go to the library, do a little bit of research, research out of books, borrow books, and just ask a lot of questions over the phone or in person. And eventually I got it right, but it took a lot of effort. And then I went on to just kind of be a little bit more masterful with that, to grow the plant, to get the dosage correct, to abide by both the microdosing concepts, which we didn't have a word for that back in the day. It was just, you're just like taking psychedelics at a low dose, and it wasn't microdosing. It was just a thing. And I didn't really know it was a thing, but I would take like San Pedro and I'd juice it, and I'd go to yoga class or I'd go on an herbal hike. And I just have this big gallon of horrible tasting bitter juice that I would be loaded on all day long and happy. And so that was just one of my kind of self-initiatory experiences. And then of course I cooked it down and learned how to do the really intense work with it. But I kind of just befriended the plant, understood its dialogue from the inside out, both as a farmer, a gardener, and as somebody who's imbibing it and looking for spirituality on a daily basis.
How did mushrooms come to be? You know,
So
there's
mushrooms,
and what made them, and what made it different too, because I mean, like 5-MeO, that's a big like spirit molecule, that's a god molecule. And then you worked with San Pedro and the other cacti, and you know that's very much from the teachings I've received. You know, that's about understanding the earth, and you know, and so you've had like a lot of this understanding. What set mushrooms apart, and why did you start your business as the Mushroom Shaman?
So a couple caveats. Like I know shamanism and the word shaman and acting as a shaman, it comes with variable degrees of pyramidal, if not multi-level energetic systems, where a person is a shaman, sometimes they're a guru, sometimes they're a teacher, sometimes they're something other than a man. And I just want to make it really clear that I'm a man. I'm a father, a lover, a warrior. I'm of the earth, and I am in some ways wearing the hat of a shaman and doing that role. But what came full circle for me when I started that brand, and I started it years ago, and I'll have to talk about my podcast and stuff like that to get the basis for that, is that the mushrooms themselves and the plants themselves, they act as the shaman. And a good guardian, a person that grows these plants, knows the nature of these plants and the mushrooms, they'll act more like an apprentice to that energy. So I kind of consider myself more of a guardian and an apprentice most of the time. And then in the ceremonies, I have to wear the full clothes of the shaman and do the full shamanic work. But most of the time, I'm a human with shamanic qualities, and I'm a good apprentice to these things.
Yeah, I love that. A big part of it is that being in stewardship of it, like how you're saying about being a guardian, and then also you are taking those steps to consistently be a student, but like almost a master student, because you're coming at it from all these different facets. You're growing it, you're learning from apprenticing under others, and you're building your own individual relationship with it. So there's like, yeah, all these different levels. I was wondering if there's any techniques or any advice that you would give to anybody else that wants to explore these realms or get closer to the medicines or like any of these facets.
Yeah, totally. So to kind of full circle the story, and I'll tell you some of the techniques in a minute. I did this thing where, again, I was kind of teaching some of the classes, sharing the knowledge of herbalism and plant wisdom. And I guess I went real loud about it in the local community, Encinitas, Swamis, Carlsbad, North San Diego. And some of the other yoga instructors got wind that I was very interested in shamanism, practicing shamanic techniques and preaching herbal knowledge and plant spirit medicine knowledge. And the martial arts teacher at the studio that I was at, he was teaching Taekwondo. He came to me and he said, you really seem real honest and earnest, and you want to learn, and I'm growing some magic mushrooms. Come on over. I'm going to teach you how to take care of them, and I'm going to go on vacation, and you just take care of the magic mushroom grow. And I'm like, sure, okay. And so, like, it was very organic. Like, I had people in the community that were just like, we respect you and honor what you're doing, and we trust you. And so my first mushroom experience was by myself in a place foreign to me that I was house sitting, and it was with fresh golden teacher mushrooms. And I put on something in their CD changer. I think their CD changer just had a bunch of stuff in it, like a 5-disc. And two of the things that it had in it were really inductive for me. One was the Shaman's Eye CD album by Liquid Bloom. And that's a really awesome album.
We know them.
And I took about 2 grams of mushrooms, and I got through that, and somewhere in the middle of that, Sonatam Kaur drops on. And Sonatam Kaur, if you don't know, she's like a Kundalini yoga instructor, kirtan, and she's just singing like pretty much repeat words like Guru Dev, praise the Guru. And I got this incredible, full, immersive vision with my eyes closed of being in Egypt and part of a caravan that was singing to this deity, to this energy. And I could see in the background like a sunset with the 3 pyramids, the 3 great pyramids. And it was mind blowing. Like, and I have had other visions, obviously with the DMT vision, it was really, really like opening. You see like the fabric of the universe being burst open, and then you kind of come back through. With the San Pedros, of course, it was very earthy, like you described, and I felt like the roots of the earth, and that's a good reference to that Liquid Bloom album. The Roots of the Earth is one of the beginning songs in there. But I had never seen, like, I would have connected to like a past life. I'd never seen that just presented to me with the mushrooms, through the mushroom visions or any of these other substances. And that was my first time, and I was just like, there's really something to this. Like, I had a visceral, almost like memory of a time in which maybe I was in Egypt traveling across the Sahara and the pyramids in the background. And I was like, wow, okay. So that made me fully jump into cultivation. I had already learned a little bit. And it ended up being that, that family and that house liked me so much that I ended up being a roommate with them for a couple years. And so I was able to grow more mushrooms there. I was able to learn from people that were experienced with ayahuasca, mushrooms, San Pedro, and a bunch of other substances. And that community over there, it's very spiritual, but it's also very like low-key psychedelic, and was low-key psychedelic for many years, probably since the 70s, when people had more access to LSD and DOD and stuff like that. So I was lucky to have good local people that were safe and had access to the medicine to teach me. And so when I got to that stage, I learned to grow magic mushroom better than the people that I had sat for. And it was fun. I ended up growing golden teachers and mazatepecs and Pai Lipayai And somewhere in the footnotes of all of this, I participated in the San Diego Mycological Society. I was on the chair for a while. And then, of course, with shamanism, there's always, and I got warned early on, there's always a darker flavor to parts of the path. And if you aren't ready to face your shadow and integrate it into who you are, then it will throw you and you will not be able to walk the path anymore. So one of the things that happened to me a few years into this, like this mushroom cultivation thing, I went on to study with Michael Harner, who passed. He was the PhD who was often known in Northern California for the Way of the Shaman course. And so I just did some practical, sober core shamanism work with him in person. And that was really great for learning the journey work practices and the drumming and stuff like that. And I still am a member of that, this Foundation for Shamanic Studies. I went on and volunteered with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I was actually a volunteer at the very first psychedelic conference. And all the while just cultivating mushrooms, studying mushrooms, really dove in with that. And I got to, and he wasn't really a big name at the time, but I got to stay with Alan Rockefeller, who is now very well. Yeah. So I stayed with Alan. He was part of the MAPS crew, or at least on the fringe of it, and he was definitely an admin for the shroomery. The shroomery back in the day was the best place to learn to grow magic mushrooms. I went mushroom hunting with Alan a few times. So in all of that, somewhere in that dance, I put on an ayahuasca retreat. I was moving. I had my partner at the time become pregnant. We weren't married or anything. And so I decided, especially after a mushroom journey, and she announcing that we were going to keep my son, whose name is Chiron, circled again. And right after he was born, I was staying with family, and my mushroom box was in storage. I went and got it because it was fruiting, and I was worried about it. And we had just had him, water birth in the backyard, beautiful Southern California August day. And my dad's partner, stepmom, freaked out. She saw the mushrooms and she's like, "Oh my God, I had a boyfriend whose house got raided. Get rid of those." So me and my endless youthful wisdom decided to transport them across town instead of throwing them in the backyard, burying them, putting them in the trash. And I had just learned to drive stick shift on my partner's car, and I drove like an ass stick shift. So I got arrested, sober, for driving stick shift, not having the right insurance. My ID was inappropriate because I didn't carry the SR22 insurance, and they searched the vehicle and found mushrooms in the vehicle in a box while they were being cultivated. So they charged me with manufacturing a controlled substance. And it was just the most hectic 6 months of my life. And so that's like the story arc of, if you're going to be shamanic, know that that's part of the shadow. And the reason that I think in retrospect, the mushrooms gave me this lesson, because they were fully alive and part of my life, and in the car, obviously, is because in order to be seen as somebody who's done something, you have to both be humbled and willing to leave the safety of your homeland with a vision or a revelation in your heart to make change happen. And it drove me away. I left California. I moved out here to Arizona because it was so hard after that to hold down a job, to get the rent paid. I had a newborn baby, and I couldn't keep it together with all of the probation and all of the Narcotics Anonymous stuff. And I was real honest. I'm still a very honest person. I opened up to the police that arrested me, and they made it seem like I was a drug addict. And I'm like having a sober conversation with them. And it just, And I would tell them, I only take medicine when I do like sweat lodge on the reservation with the Indians. We sometimes have peyote. And they made it seem like I just needed help from the government to handle an addiction. And I was floored. And I just left that behind. And yes, California is in my heart and I love the environment there, but it's not my home.
I get that as well. I always felt like we're not supposed to die where we were born. Like there are a lot of people who do that, but for me it was like so alive that like I had to go, like my home is somewhere else, or that was a homesick for a place I had never been. They actually have a term for that. It's Fenway. And I really definitely felt that. And I've run into troubles too legally, and I always felt too like it's a lesson, like it was happening for me for a reason, getting in trouble for something. Especially in the plant medicine space, it's always been about that in my experience as well. But when it can be scary. It's scary when there's kids involved. It's scary when there's not even, but when there's kids involved, it's even more, because it's not just your life anymore. And it's like, is that going to impact them? Are they going to think that you're doing something wrong because a policeman or a policewoman saying that you're doing something wrong? It's like, it's a more of a dynamic situation, but I'm glad that you took control. I'm glad that your mindset was in a space so that this is happening for me. How do I, use this momentum to create something that's more in alignment? It's unfortunate that these things happen. It's unfortunate that, part of it has to be that it's illegal, these beautiful plants that are from nature, or that, you're looked upon like you have like an addiction or something like that, when a lot of these plants are helping addictions. And it's crazy that there's not more teachings around it, but I'm so grateful that there is so many more teachings now than there was before. Like when, as you mentioned before earlier, like there was no word for microdosing. Like that was something that I would keep quiet. It's like, I'm diddling the dose. You don't talk about that.
Right.
So, now it's like, that's a regular conversation. It's an actual therapy. And there's a lot of these medicines that are, being thought of in this way now, which I think is quite wonderful.
I think that's so wonderful. And to comment on that, it was a double taboo. Before we had a word for microdosing, all of the heavy users, all the macrodose, heroic dose users were like, what are you doing? You're not dissolving your ego. Don't do it. And then everybody else they were just normies. And they're like, no, that's a drug. Don't mess with it. And it was like, well, I was told like, and many of my friends were told like, we have something wrong with us. You need to take a pill every day so you can go to school and be normal. Like that was the biggest, hardest, and still one of the most jagged things in my memory, is that I was told by my mom, Trev, every day your brain's not working right. You need to take this, and then you need to go to the nurse and take this again in the middle of the day. And it was like, so I could behave, right? And so now it's like, maybe I was just, in retrospect, maybe I was just handling the challenges of the divorce, handling the challenges of physical childhood trauma. And I was hyper anxious, and my environment, be it that it was a public school, yes, it was a good school district, it just didn't feel safe in some way. And so when we microdose, we talk about that conversation. It starts to talk about anxiety. It talks about, childhood trauma. And it's like, we're not necessarily resolving these things, but we're becoming a lot more functional as a result, and maybe even mindful and open to things like therapy or whatever else is out there. Like I do a lot with acupuncture. I do it on myself as well as I receive it. And I've had so many emotional releases with acupuncture. And it's amazing.
I think it's a great way to look at it, that any of these entheogens. They're a gateway to just a better lifestyle. They're a gateway drug to like all of the things we actually need to be doing. And a lot of these diagnoses like ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, there's actually a term that was classified in the alternative teaching methods, and it's called NDD, which is nature deficit disorder. And what it proves is that when they're taking students back into nature and doing more forest schooling, that those things that are being medicated actually just dissolve over time because the environment is more conducive to what our human bodies need. They need to be outside. They need to be moving. They need a whole bunch of stuff that we don't get from the regular school system or from our culture really as a whole.
Absolutely. And I feel like I was a better person in nature connections. We had a ranch, and I would enjoy running around at the ranch over in Palomar Mountain. And then I would, we had this place where we'd go camp. Our school had like a camp week. I think it was called Camp Cuyamaca, and it was really enjoyable to be out hiking. And I just had the ability to sort of discharge a lot of the energy that I would normally have stuck sitting there in a chair all day long. Yeah, and I've since I've been raising my son since 2011. He's a kinesthetic. He's very tactile. He has a hard time sitting still, and I'm just like, all right, man, let's move around. You know, if you got to listen to an audio book instead of read it, you know, if you got to go run around for 20 minutes so you can sit for 20 minutes, let's make that happen. But I know, like, he's been having some trouble. He was mostly homeschooled. He went back into an academy school. He's been having a lot more trouble just getting through the classes and probably sitting and doing the homework with his mom and stuff. Especially since it happens. Like, I mean, a lot of this stuff is, and if you want to talk like big picture, it's not just single lifetime stuff. And I'm sure it was really hard when I went to jail and he was like a week old and he could feel the energy of anxiety around his mom and me and family. But also, like, this is like generational stuff. Like, he's got stuff, I've got stuff, my mom's got stuff, my dad's got stuff from their parents. And ayahuasca and even mushrooms at certain times, when you take enough of them, they show you this stuff. And a lot of the training that I took later, and a lot of the sober shamanism, the real deep shamanistic work where we're talking about like psychology and family systems and heritage and ancestors, all of that starts to touch into a new realm of where I think, you know, Ralph Metzner was going. You know, integrative psychology, the Center for Integral Studies and stuff like that. We're seeing like people have really intense breakthroughs just doing somatic breath work versus, you know, having to do large doses of ayahuasca, spend lots of money going on retreat and stuff like that. Or my least favorite thing is to hear that somebody who had trauma went seeking help and then was abused by somebody who's supposed to help them. And that's like, I tell people nowadays who are seeking help, you want to take a trip with me and you don't know me. You're in town in Sedona for the weekend and you want me to sit you and you take a dose of mushrooms. Doesn't sound like a good idea. Maybe make a plan about it. You know, you're trying to trip with some rando. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm a bad person, but you just met me. And the same thing, you go to ayahuasca retreat, and you're sitting with a bunch of people who you've never met. Maybe you have some hours to integrate, and that'd be great, pre-integration. And then you've got these people that maybe you have rapport with, maybe you don't, and they're administering you a substance that you don't necessarily know what's in it. There's a lot. I tell people it's a coin toss these days. Mm-hmm. So
we hear
know what you're doing.
We hear all kinds of different stories, you know, even like sometimes it's not even with the medicine. You know, I've gotten people calling me they're integrating after Reiki because they had an assault. And that's not even with the substance, but it does happen a lot different retreats and things like that too. You really do have to do your due diligence and your preparation work. It's just as valuable as the integration afterwards and the ceremony itself. Another thing too that comes up is around like these group settings. People pay large amounts of money and then they go to these retreats, and then it's like a bunch of people who have more money. So then everything else costs a little extra. If you want that one-on-one, or you want somebody to sit with you or to talk to you, it's like that costs a little extra money. So then the people who go there and they've already spent all their money to be there, they're not getting the full support that they need. And not just because it goes by priority scale, who's invested the most. It's not equal. And then also, when you have a huge amount of people, especially if you don't know the people, it's like you're picking up their energy. That's not exactly like preparation. That's not the same as setting intentions and sitting with yourself and knowing what yourself needs. That energy is diluted by so much more that's around. And it can be great to go sit, in the jungle and have a ceremony. There's so many benefits to this, but there is also a lot to consider before you just jump in. Because, there are a lot of negative stories, just as there are so many that are about healing and positivity and breakthroughs and transformation.
I mean, and so there's positive and negative stories. What about the third piece of the pie? There's stories where it's like it did nothing.
Yes.
I took mushrooms, it did nothing. I microdosed, it did nothing. It's not working for me. So I had to. When I started mushroomshaman.com, which was a branch of Theo Radio podcast, I had already done a number of years of recording with people in the industry. Because I was like, if I can't get a degree or even hold like a regular job in which because I'm a felon now, that I could be a psychedelic researcher or a therapist, then I should talk to all of them. Give the world an opportunity to hear them firsthand, and me an opportunity to learn directly from conversation. And so I did a number of years of just podcasting with really great researchers in the field, shamans, people that have had a lot of life experience with psychedelics and shamanism. And the result of that was like, I need to really branch and get just a mushroom specific entity. And between a conversation with some great people up in the Pacific Northwest, I'm going to say Peter McCoy really influenced that. His book is called Radical Mycology, best book on mushrooms ever. Kind of an unsung hero of the mycological revolution, because that book, it digs in real deep to the history of psychedelic mushrooms and the declassified CIA files that are associated with R. Gordon Wasson and some of these amazing greats that we consider grandfathers or fathers of the psychedelic revolution or revival, if you want to go so far to include Terence McKenna. Peter McCoy really just blows me away. And then he does the Radical Mycology Conference. He's up there around Portland area. And then Shauna Holm, Love and Spirit Medicine. She did this book called Love and Spirit Medicine. But man, she is, if there's any white American Western woman who I consider a shamaness, a shamanic priestess, it's Shauna. And she has done some just solo trips in the forest and had an amazing sort of McKennian dialogue with the mushroom spirits, and she's had lectures on mushrooms and got kind of popular for that, and healing, working with women and working with the mushroom medicine. But then she did a 90 degree and she went into sovereignty and had a whole lot of conversations about becoming sovereign and being like able to use this medicine and able to exert your rights and have liberties, because she claimed the mushrooms told her you need to be sovereign. And out of those two conversations, I was like, I needed to make something. So I created mushroomshaman.com probably around 2015, 2014. And I was just like influenced in around the turn of 2012 to 2013 that something needed to shift, and it needed to be the conversation around how, the mycelium is the message. The mushrooms really have something to teach our society right now, as it is, in my assessment, again, as a shamanic practitioner, as a shamanic minister, and people tend to define shamans in different ways, but I define shamans as somebody with knowledge of the end times, knowledge of what's going to close out this society. And whether or not it closes out in one lifetime, they know that there are certain paths to dead ends. And one of those paths to dead ends, I feel it coming. And I have to say, like, it's related to a lot of what our society is already doing. The slave economy, you know, the idea of, you know, you work for the dollar, you trade your time for something that's inflatable, that we're inflating all the time. And you don't trade like direct anymore. There's no barter system. I don't get water for trading mushrooms or anything like that. But the mushrooms themselves, the mycelium itself, kind of, if you look at its nature and the doctrine of likenesses, like alchemically speaking, you know, if it's red, then maybe it's Martian. If it's red, then maybe it's iron oxide. Like, mushrooms are a decomposer, and they're here to just work through something that is excess and is not usable anymore, and turn it back into usable commodities and goods, even sustainable food. We're in excess all the time in this Western world. Mushrooms decompose plastic, for example. So obviously the mycelium is the message, and it is helping us with whatever we're going through right now, which is, I think, a decaying society, a dying society, helping to process and decompose it.
Yeah, and I think it helps us digest it as well, in having that, in seeing it that way, like the fractal effect of it. That it's a decomposer. We're in a dying society. And when we're working with the medicines, helping us cope with that. Whereas we can't cope with that knowing, and that's why a lot of highly sensitive individuals end up medicated or addicted to certain substances. It's hard to cope with the human suffering, and things are out of alignment. You know, it's not, this culture is not suitable for our human bodies. In fact, it's traumatic for our bodies, and our bodies almost go into this like a neglected or beaten animal, like a wounded animal. That's why the somatic work is so powerful today, and why the breath work, like you were mentioning, is so powerful, because it brings us back. And it's also why these mushrooms and other medicines are such allies for us. It brings in a kind of remembering, yes, of our past lives, but also it brings with it like an understanding of future times, and how we adjust into that, how we can adapt to our current circumstances and even thrive in a dying society.
Absolutely. It also might help with our understanding of slave time, which I also like to call linear time, so that we can break free and have cyclical, if not fractal time. Both, I mean, almost all substances seem to do that. Like I've noticed more fractal time, more stuff like, if you look at the background here, the tree of life, when I take large doses of mushrooms, those Celtic knots, that's really the way time is. These paisleys, the people were smoking Halma and they were smoking Syrian rue, and they came up with this paisley pattern. This is how life, this fractal energy is how life really is. And we can't trade that for dollars. We can't trade that for anything. And it makes it like, let's punch a clock, point A to point B, and then we take this product of point A and point B and we turn it into something else. That is not who and how we are. That's not how life and death dance. And that's, you know, maybe it's what people weren't ready for, and that's why I had to leave California, come out here to the desert for a good time, and and hopefully not a long time.
Yeah, it's I spent some time in Mount Shasta last year, and that's where a lot of, like, there's nobody from Mount Shasta that was born in Mount Shasta. It's all just travelers that people who end up there. It's the root chakra of the planet. It's like really magical place. But you know, it's very common that people will go back and forth between Mount Shasta and Arizona, where you're at in the desert, depending on the season. So
Sedona, like for sure. It's the same vibe in Sedona.
He ended up in a good spot. My uncle hangs out there too. He finds crystals like right from the ground and like brings them back for different family members.
I did this on the eclipse. on the eclipse, I took some peyote and I went for a nice walk, and I found probably like
Oh,
40 pounds of these fire agates that have got crystals in them. And
oh, that's so wonderful.
yeah, not too far from where I live.
So, why don't you share some of the techniques now, some things that you find are like really useful for beginners that just want to connect with more spiritual energy with the plants, anything that could assist for the at-home beginner shaman?
Okay. So the first caveat is shamanism, by definition, is an archaic technique for ecstasy. It's a mystic path. So mysticism is like religion and faith in some ways, but it's also like following your inner guidance, your intuition, and doing what feels right, what feels good. One of my teachers, who I love him, he really showed me a lot about creating ritual, creating improvisational, original ritual with altars and for groups in the public. Um, he would say, with the healing work, one-on-one, if you as the practitioner are uncomfortable, if you don't feel good, if there isn't like a good feeling in your body, then you're not healing yourself or them. Don't do it.
Oh,
So,
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't even cook if I'm in a bad mood. I'm like,
Right,
my love has to go into that. And,
right, absolutely.
there's a shaman in Mexico that's considered the lazy shaman. And a lot of people go down, want to work with him, and then he'll be like, nope, not doing ceremony today. It's not the day. And people go off and find somebody else because they just want the medicine. But the truth is, like, you'll get a lot of different medicine and more, deeper medicine if people were just going down and learning that lesson of patience from that guy, so yeah, there's power behind that. Thank you for sharing.
Totally. And there's power in the no. There's like I tell most people who hit me up within 24 hours, even 48 hours, 36 hours, I want a delivery of mushrooms. I want you to do some shamanic work for me, and I'm dropping into Sedona and I'm passing through your area. Like, can you meet with me? And it's like, if you knew you were doing this travel, you could have hit me up weeks ago or just a few days ago and said, I feel really called to this. Can I interview with you? I always let people speak to me for free. I have questionnaires on my website. I have free documents, pre-integration, post-integration. Like, write me about your trauma. Let me know like what I'm dealing with, so I don't have to do like a full-blown exorcism and not have a spot, a secondary, not have the right tools. I mean, crazy shit happens at higher levels of psilocybin dosing, and even just with people with trauma. So one of the best things to do, because shamanism is so many things, is to start drumming, dancing, moving your body, being in the soma. And the drumming is amazing on various things like YouTube. You can just get headphones and just do drum journeys, get yourself into the process of binaural beat activation, hemispheric synchronization, and stuff like that. And I learned this stuff all as a kid, which was really wonderful. I got the hemisync programs from the Monroe Institute, and I was already doing that kind of meditation as a kid. So doing it live with a drummer is excellent, but you can also just start at home. And a rattle works well, a tambourine works well. Just get into that music as a path to releasing some of these emotional anxieties and or pent up energies is a good start for most people. And then I would say moving around, do a yoga class, do a dance class, take a float. Like, if you can't float for money at a float pod studio, then fill your tub with some salt water. It's going to cost you $7 an Epsom salt. Float, be in your body.
Go to the Salt Lake.
Yeah, go to the Salt Lake if you can.
Yeah.
Oh man. So there's so much just being in that body and then seeing what comes up as a mystic, seeking what's inside and acknowledging it so it doesn't have power over you. It's always when I talk to students, it's always the people that have the repeat dreams, the dreams which are not lucid at all, and there's always something chasing them. these people have the hardest times. And it's usually just the self. It's usually just your shadow chasing you. It's Peter Pan, chasing his shadow, or the shadow chasing him. And then as a result, a lot of us don't grow out of our trauma. We run away from it. We become lost boys and girls. So those are the first steps. There's a lot of really cool things out there. Just kind of get into your body, get into the sound, get into the body, move the body, breathe with the body. If you want to go a little bit more advanced, then do a breath work. I mean, Wim Hof is really popular. That's a cool breath work. Do some yogic breath work, pranayama. You can look up pranayama. I like the shining skull exercise, and then holding the breath at the end of that. It's also called breath of fire.
Yeah.
These are great starts.
Mentioning breath of fire, you also brought up Kundalini yoga in the past, that was one of the soundtracks that you found. And that's actually been my technique. I couldn't meditate. I'd worked with psychedelics, so I thought, I can hit meditation, but it was so hard for me to shut my brain off, or to get there. Like, there's just too much that was crowded, too much in the way. But when I started doing Kundalini yoga practice, there's this part where you're moving so repetitively and you have to just keep going. So then it's taking all your willpower to just focus on the continuing. And then in addition, you have your breath work. So you're kind of activating your own DMT endogenously. But then what is really the magical part, the breakthrough, is the chanting, the mantra, the sacred words of empowerment over and over and over again. And if it's in Sanskrit, it doesn't matter, because it's like an ancestral knowing of what it means, a universal language, or something with the vibration itself. I believe that.
Absolutely. And that brings up a great point, Ashley. One of the things that they studied monks, priests, ascetics, and Maria Sabina all having in common, Maria Sabina being a very popular mushroom shaman in history, considered the first, to expose mushrooms, magic mushrooms, to the world, the Western world. Everyone sang, and they all sang in a certain rhythm, and that energy being released. Maria Sabina was known as somebody who would sing and chant, and often she would thrum on her own body and keep pace. And by doing that, you're moving energy. You're moving energy. Now, add a psychedelic to it, you're moving even more energy. And the beautiful thing is, if you're doing Om Mani Padme Hum, or you're doing the Hail Marys, they're making you breathe. These singing, these chantings, and if you do them enough, they cause actual physiological change because of the breath practice. So singing is, again, really connected to music, really connected to shamanism and health, moving energy.
Yeah, thank you. So powerful. Just shifting gears here a little bit, I'm curious, how do you see the psychedelic landscape evolving, in this Western world? Because, there's already been so many changes since you started, and, there's just more to come. It's almost snowballing in a way. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you see coming, or that you're in hope for and would like to see manifest.
Well, the recognition of non-physical psychedelics would be great. Just like you talked about with Kundalini and our inner stuff, just kind of being with our own supply, if you will, or high on our own supply of breath and dance and movement. And seeing that as a really full-blown aspect of psychedelic therapy, that would be awesome. I started this before we had the word integration. I think that's a cool word. I like it. But it was all just talking circle. It was people getting together and having real conversations. And I think if we could not make it seem so sciencey, people having talking circle once again in an organic, tribal way, that would be great. I mean, I don't need to be the guru. If people they can manage and not banter back and forth and stay on topic. And again, in talking circle, we always had a talking stick. So one person talking at a time. man, these are great therapeutic techniques. And they're ancient, and we didn't need to scientize them and modernize them and call them integration. But it's great that everyone's talking about integration, because it's forcing people who didn't use integration to at least promise that as part of their ceremonies and or retreats. I think just keeping the conversation is important, and whether we keep that amongst ancestors, relatives, family, or tribe, or people that are wanting to get help from friend circles, close-knit friend circles, that's all great. I didn't attend Burning Man, but I attended a local event. Did it on San Pedro in San Diego County. It's the utopia down there in San Diego County. One of the best things that they do, because I know everyone's doing psychedelics at some of these events, is they put little signs around, and one of the signs said, "Communication is the best lubrication." And I just remember that, and I love it.
That's great. Gosh, I love the idea of like just everybody coming back together in like circle and tribe. It's like we were not made to do this alone, and there's such like a standard on like, yeah, do it alone, be a lone wolf, be independent. It's like those are all really valuable skills to have, but that's not the state we're supposed to thrive for or be in all the time. We're such a communal species. Like a baby who's not touched will die. Like we literally need the touch. I believe that we need the vibrations from communication, whether it's language, whether it's even somebody who speaks the same language. It's just that sharing that space and that vibration, and kind of tapping into something that's beyond ourselves. We can be our own worst enemy a lot of the time. I believe in the power of, honoring yourself and your independence and your alone time. But there's, this other piece, a duality to everything. And I love that you touched on that. And I hope, that in the future there's more circles. I know we've got one that's going to start back up too this month. I think May 17th is the day, and that was inspired by you too. So thank you so much for that. I was.
Was it your group? So I've been connected to you on the Signal group for like 2 years, maybe 2.5 now.
Yeah.
I think someone posted it was either your group or this other church group that I belong to, again, psychedelic groups, on an encrypted messenger app called Signal. And it was a pigeon speaking, like a white dove or a pigeon speaking about what's going on with our societies. And it was, I think they were talking about Canada, like the Canadian society, and how the corporations who were putting out the vaccines were just telling us they were safe, and no one was holding them accountable. And by seeing a commercial suggesting that it's safe and not asking for proof, by being silent, we are consenting to whatever they're saying. And I'm just like, that blew me away, because if communication is the best lubrication, then silence in some ways is like kind of the opposite, like the rough sex of of whatever that vibe is, and more or less rape.
Yeah, and it is hard and destructive, to the body, to the soul, to the spirit, in a lot of ways. So yeah, it is powerful to like to sit with that and figure out, for ourselves as individuals what that means. And you'd mentioned about the word integration, and I like using that word because I've got different certifications that have that in the title, and it brings it all together. But at the same time, I struggled with that too a little bit, because what actually introduced me to it was there's a lot of the Harvard Psychedelic Club. They started a nutrition school called the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and they were a lot of them, like Dr. Andrew Weil. He was advocating for like different health practices and things like that, which is great, and just having patient activists, and they did a lot of work. But one of the things that they also did, a lot of these guys, Deepak Chopra, Dr. Andrew Weil, is they didn't focus on psychedelics. It was all about these integration tools. And so, I felt like, that was kind of my space too. It's like, there's all this other stuff. And, we're working with all these medicines and you're at that point too. You're like, let's just do it endogenously. Like, how do I like just ride that high on my own, and it's nice to work with the medicines to know that you're able to get to those points. It shows you that there's something else, but still ultimately us to do that. And I don't think that we're meant to do that alone. It is still, finding your tribe, finding your people, and, having accountability partners that are growing too, in the same direction. Sometimes that does mean letting go of different parts of yourself. You don't have to integrate all the different ego states that you have. Some of them it's okay to let go of if they're not serving. We can integrate the love and integrate the lessons from those experiences instead. Yeah, I'm just ranting now.
No, that's great. I recently was at the Arboretum, which is like a tree museum out in the desert, and they've done a great job with their cactus. They have a lot of Trichoceros, San Pedros out there. And one of the things that I noticed is they took pieces from the boxes that go around the bottom of the trees as they're coming in. So there's metal as a frame, and then there's wood. And they recycled it into the landscape and made it art. And so one of the things we rarely talk about when we talk about integration, most of the people are just like, oh yeah, I did that. It was rough. And now I'm on the other side of it. But what if you recycle it? Like, what if you take your ego or a component of your ego, because we all have different pieces of ourselves, let's say left over from childhood trauma, that are misbehaving. And this parts work has really been a real great part of the dialogue in my life lately. And so my therapists and friends will ask me, what if you could take that part that doesn't feel safe when, let's say, your partner goes out drinking and asks for a ride to go home? What if that part that judges, what if you ask that part to do something different? What if you just recycle it, reprocess? And it's going to be hard for you, just like pounding metal into a new shape. But eventually, just like in the Arboretum, the box metal becomes a lantern case, or they've repurposed it for something around. And it's entirely recycling. So we have this energetic system. Let's say it gives us anxiety. Let's say if it gives us fear. Well, that fear, that's extra energy. Mm-hmm. How can we recycle it? Yeah. And so as I teach people about shamanism, I'm always like, well, the bad trips are the best for growth. And you have a lot of material that's coming up. Maybe you can't swallow it, take it, process it, can't pound out 100 boxes to make 100 lanterns in one day, but you can take one box, peel the metal off it, and make one lantern versus having a box that you don't need anymore. Man, that's anxiety about a certain thing or situation that you could shift into feeling safe or feeling confirmed or drawing a really great opportunity for communication.
Yeah, that's so great. We do, like, I've been studying hypnosis and NLP, so I've been like diving deep into like this part stuff too. I like a lot of times in psychedelics, there's like this thing about ego death. But I like what you're saying about recycling, because it never sat right with me to hate a part of yourself so much that you want to kill it. It's like, that's not self-love. That's kind of the opposite message that psychedelics give us. They do make it easy to shed layers of ourselves, but I never thought it was about like killing a part of yourself. It never sat right. So in doing this parts work and integration, using integration tools, I started to realize that, that's really what it's about. It's like just kind of like repurposing it, coming at it from like a different angle. I love the idea of like inquisitively like asking yourself. It brings up an opportunity. It's volunteering yourself to do things different instead of circling. You're spiraling and growing through the experience. It's not always easy to do that, but I think it is really important that we we tell different parts of ourselves, I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. Or that's not serving. Like that judge isn't like helping in any relationship right now. It's not, going to actually serve. It's not going to bring anything. So what can I do instead? Or, what's a different mindset that I can have? Or how do I make this not about me and put the focus onto somebody else? Sometimes that's the best thing to do.
Absolutely. And it's very Native American in its philosophy, because if you're an animist like I am, destroying something like part of the self or even an animal or an object isn't really destroying the soul. The soul, the spirit is still there. It's just changing forms. And in some ways, the whole premise for the Indian giver concept, where an Indian might give you a gift and you hold this rock and you take it and accept this gift. But if you're not using it, and I just see it sitting around like you've just displaced it and you don't really care for it, I might want it back so I can give it to somebody who's going to use it. Mm-hmm. So the same concept is like, we're not really in ownership of the ego. It's a borrow. So we can trade it. Yeah. What'd you say?
Yeah, that reduces it, like the hold that it has over us, and like the power it can have to want to identify and like keep us in that same cycle, because that's what the ego's, that part of the ego, there's many different ego parts, but that part of the ego that's not serving, or that perhaps like we don't want there anymore because it's a saboteur, it's about like bringing that into alignment, like telling that part, you are safe, like figuring out those techniques to soothe it so that it becomes in alignment with the soul, not getting rid of it per se. It served us for a reason. That's why it exists, is for a reason. So where's the love and the lesson in that? Where can you go from here, integrating that or bringing it into alignment with the soul?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of talking about it. And the same is true with the thoughts. The thoughts aren't our ego. The ego's in our thoughts. And it's neither of those things are us. They aren't really us. Or our emotions.
Identify with them so badly.
Yeah. Oh, we're in relationship with them. Now, are we in right relationship? That's questionable.
Yes. Yeah. I'd really like to see meditation become more of an epidemic. There's a lot of people like the My Dose, like the coffee substitute. They now have a mindfulness app like attached to it that you get for free when you're working with these mushrooms. And, I'd love to see more of that, because in the meditation, like just that process, even just sitting there for like a minute or two a day and just being like, no, I'm not my thoughts, or I see that, but it's not me. Like just that process of like a minute or two, it's like that has such a profound ripple effect in all areas of your life. Once you do it once, like you start to see that you're just the observer of them, and that brings you back into your own personal power. You get to start utilizing your willpower instead of having it hijacked from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then recognizing how more powerful you are if you're not this small thing inside of you bossing you around or making you feel a certain way. It's like, now you're reconnected. Now you can get out of suffering. You're connected to Creator, Great Spirit.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to bring up the website here, just being respectful of time. Sure. And you can let everybody know, what you're doing, how they can connect with you, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Thank you. So mushroomshaman.com is the main page, and you can see me sitting there over the coastal cliffs of La Jolla, California. And it just gives you a basis for scheduling an appointment, who I am, what the work we do is like. There's a bunch of really cool articles in there if you scroll down. Some stuff I put in there over the years, my ruminations on Paul Stamets's stack and why microdosing and how microdosing is important, and in some ways defaming some of the theories he has around adding B vitamins to a microdose stack and stuff like that. Plus, if you click on the shop, it takes you to a whole separate site. Shop links on the top. And this site is, again, a requirement of everyone, even if you place an anonymous order or whatever, is that everyone speaks with me, that you agree to your Amendment 1 religious rights to receive healing prayers and sacraments from a minister, and I am a minister. You can get sacraments on the site, such as capsules for microdosing, ormus that I make personally, mushrooms that I pick in the wild, and cactus that I grow and cut. And then some of the things that my cousin Tawny makes. So it's just all very chain of custody, very integral. I tell people, you can speak to me for free, at least for now, and it has been that way since the inception of the site. And before, we had an Etsy site, and of course there's different disagreements about what's within the policies of Etsy, and microdosing psilocybin is definitely not, but it's out there. So if you're looking for it, just know who you're getting it from. And if there's anything that doesn't work for you, I always tell people this: now that you've kind of consented to your religious freedom and you're under ministerial care, shamanic ministerial care by myself, as an herbalist, as somebody who cares about you and the wellness of his community, if something doesn't work right, something bothers you, we exchange it, or I just give you your donation back. I'm not here to have you have a harder time or to send negative energy. I want you to heal. And if there's some reason that I can't help you, or some other way that I think someone else or something else will help you better, I will recommend that. I send a lot of people to dragonherbs.com. I send people to my cousin if it's more of a cannabis related thing. I mean, I'm not the entire generalist. I'm very specialist, and I try to make my speciality listening to humans and animals and the soul of the earth. And yes, the mushrooms are a part of that, but my expertise is in listening.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the services and products that you're putting out there, just your whole demeanor and heart around it. I can really tell, like, in our time together, but, specifically coming on, like, and hearing your passion, it's like, it's real. This is what the world needs more of, is people who are doing this work just for the heart and soul of it, for like to just, crusade the human suffering that's happening right now, so the planet can get back into frequency, so that we can work symbiotically with it again. We've become so separate, and it's it makes sense because there's like a duality to everything, but at the same time is also like this union that humans are craving right now. And I think that the more aligned that we can get with nature, the more respect we can have for the plants and the planet, the less suffering that there's going to be in our hearts, in our bodies, and as a whole, as a species. So yeah, thank you so much, Hugh, for everything you're doing and everything that's going to come.
Thank you too. Raising a family and being a mom is a huge, huge step in the right direction. Actions speak very loud, and you're very loud in a very pleasant way.
Thank you.
And you're kind of I know, since you're a mother, Mother's Day is happening this weekend, and you're in an honorable position. So you're already kind of like a high priestess to a lot of the communities that I've seen you run in for years now. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I like to tap into like the indigenous and like the goddess energy. One of my early downloads, was just non-identify. And I think that's so funny because the youth of today wants to identify with everything. And one of my first downloads when I was a youth was just be non-identified, and like don't identify, non-identified. And so, yeah, even getting certificates, I still am like, yeah, I got that, but it's not me. And I don't know where that comes from, but I really do appreciate all you say. I love everything I do. I love this community. I'm really grateful for it all, and I see the momentum and I see the growth of so many, and it's such a blessing. So I'm curious, before we go here, is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything else you'd like to say, or you want to share your Instagram or anything, for if maybe your website's the best way for people to contact you? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that you're right on there with the unidentifiable, unidentifying. I'm a Aquarius rising, and I like to rebel against things. So I'm not going to share my Instagram. I'm not going to share my socials. You can dig around. You can find me. You can find Mushroom Shaman brand, but the website is the best spot. And even like sign of the times. Like I'm over here watching the planet desertify, and the cost of gasoline and the cost of water go up, and I'm like, man, mushrooms are wonderful. If everyone can just grow them, we're going to have a real economy of friendship and barter and trade. But man, cactus are one of those things where it's food, it's medicine, it's everything, and it's sign of the times, the most latest evolution on the planet. And we're doing a lot of rough things to the resources on this planet. I just want to remind y'all that we're here on a borrow, so hopefully we're being very fair in our trade with the plants, with the earth, and with each other.
Thank you. With that, you guys, we're going to head out of here. I hope that you take the time to go check out mushroomshaman.com. Look this man up. He's wonderful. If you're in the network, you're welcome to hit him up in private message as well. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, sharing all of these wonderful insights with us. And I guess we're going to go about our days and our work, because the work's never done.
Right. Thank you, Ashley.
Bye for now.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20 is so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.